What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my co-host straight out of New York Comic Con, Dave Martinson. What's going on, Dave?
How's it going, Doug?
How was Comic Con?
My 12th year, my friend.
Wow.
They all blend together. They're all good. Stumbled across Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead, just kind of signing. Like, wasn't even that big a line. I was like, well, wait a minute. That's his name? Oh, look, there he is right there. Cool.
Just chilling.
Billy D. Williams was there signing and stuff. So was Paul Rudd and Tom Hiddleston. Didn't see them. Yeah, it's a good time. Good time. Big Watchmen presence there. They had a panel. Didn't go. What else is pro? I mean, not a lot of big news really broken out of New York the way like San Diego. We usually talk about San Diego stuff. New York's just kind of more like for the fans and hanging out and stuff. So yeah, good time.
Cool.
Usual.
Glad you enjoyed it. Any discussions or panels or anything like that?
No, I'm just hanging out when my brother's walking the show floor, seeing all the various cool things you can buy and see and stuff, digging through the comic crates once in a while, which is always fun, especially when they're not alphabetized and you're just randomly looking through things and like, oh, I'll find something maybe.
Shouts to Little Martinson. Presence on the pod is certainly felt from time to time. And if you enjoy Little Martinson's presence on the podcast, give us a subscribe on YouTube and go to soundcloud.com/nowstalgiapod to follow the podcast any way you want to. We got only a couple things to talk about, but I think there's a lot to break down with all of it. And let's start with Danny Brown, Dave. This is an album. His new album came out this past Friday. You Know What I'm Saying? Upside down question mark. It kind of surprised me because I think we've talked about Danny Brown here and there on the pod, but he had never been somebody that I was really super interested in, that I found particularly for my taste. And then this album really caught my ear and surprised me. And I'm wondering if you had the same feeling listening to You Know What I'm Saying.
Yeah, so this is definitely like a new stage, new era for Danny Brown in his career, I would say, because his last album, the one we discussed, Atrocity Exhibition, that came out back in 2016. It's a while ago. And that's definitely like his opus as far as all of his work to go. Super lyrical, super dense, really unique, really raw stuff. And that album rules. I know I had Really Doe, the single with Earl and Kendrick, on my top 10 songs of that year list. But now Danny is just, finally more successful and a little older. He was already old. And maybe some of that bite might be gone. But now I think he's just making something really quirky, like because the production on this album, which is overseen by Q-Tip, who executive produced this. This production's kind of wild. It's all over the place. But Danny Brown has always been able to ride any beat, and that hasn't changed. And his unique nasally flow is still here. So I think this is exactly what most people would want from Danny Brown. It's a quick listen, and I don't think it has the ambition. Doesn't try and accomplish as much as Atrocity Exhibition did, but that's okay. It's kind of reminds me of like Denzel Curry following up Taboo with Zoo. A little lower stakes stuff, but still quite high quality. Still a lot to dig into. So yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting sounding album. You mentioned the production on this is a little all over the place, but he has some really interesting collaborators on this too that I think bring out different sounds, including obviously Run the Jewels, the single Three Tears, which is just a banger of a song. But then you look down the list, Blood Orange on Shine, I think brings his trademark sound. I was listening to it and I was like, this sounds a bit familiar. The ambiance in particular of the song, and then when I started to hear Dev Hynes, I saw Blood Orange was on this. I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But I feel like they collab pretty well. JPEG Mafia on Negro Spiritual, I think, adds his influence and is really great. And also, I might say this name wrong, but Obong Jr. on Belly of the Beast.
Yeah, he made quite the impression. I was not familiar with him. He's a Nigerian artist from the UK. Yeah, sparse guest spots, but I think they go a long way considering it's relatively breezy runtime. Um, it's funny. There's not a lot of samples on You Know What I'm Saying. Trossi Exhibition was very sample heavy, and Danny Brown notoriously paid for all those himself, and later remarked that you shouldn't spend 70 grand on samples for an album that no one will purchase. Mm-hmm. So he didn't go that route this time, But I think what's so cool about the production this time around is that there's just a lot of stuff there, like combat at the end, like very obvious horns. And earlier on, there's a Savage Nomad guitar stands out. And then Best Life, one of the singles, I think the second single, very obvious orchestral, like violins and cellos and stuff. So Q-Tip didn't make every beat. He only made Combat and Dirty Laundry and Best Life. But you definitely feels like it was a lot of intent with kind of picking the arrangements this time around, which is cool. And probably a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and I think Q-Tip's presence is felt throughout because one of the, I guess if I had to pick a style that this falls into, and like you talked about, it's a bit all over the place and eclectic and in a good way, but it reminded me a lot of like late 90s hip hop in a sense, or that was at least the feeling I had throughout it. And I think Danny, like you said, he can ride on any beat, but the song that probably stood out to me the most, and we already mentioned some that were great, Three Tiers, Savage Nomad, Best Life, Shine, theme song. I really, really thought the theme song was a really great song. You talk about the info or the way that he constructed the songs and how there's little flourishes and the strings, the trumpet, the xylophone on that song, all just like really, really stand out and make it one of the songs on this record that I think I find most unique, and he just glides over that so beautifully. It's a really great song. I really can't say enough about this, how this album surprised me, because I think if I remember is released back in 2016, I wasn't a big fan. So
yeah, much more dense last time for sure. Interestingly, Danny, this is out on Warp Records, which is a independent London label. So I would say support Danny Brown if you can, because definitely goes a longer way. He's not splitting this up with Atlantic or anything. But yeah, I mean, I feel like most people at this point probably know Danny Brown or in on Danny Brown, and if they're not, I guess this would be a lovely surprise if this was the jumping off point. I would probably recommend you start with Old if you're just getting into Danny Brown. You probably know Smoking and Drinking from the Silicon Valley end credits scene that one time. But yeah, Danny Brown's a fantastic artist, and it's great to hear him again because it's been a while.
Speaking of fantastic artists, maybe working for a new production company, your guy Ryan Murphy dropping his first show for Netflix. Who famously signed both him and Shonda Rhimes, along with some other creators, to start making TV shows. And Ryan Murphy has been connected with Fox and FX a lot recently. Shows he obviously came up with Glee and Nip Tuck, two shows that in his early days got popularity, but then more recently American Horror Story, Pose, even 911.
Yeah.
And I mean, the guy just puts out shows people want to watch. And the show, The Politician, had a lot of anticipation, I think, among people who are tuned into like the theater world and TV show world, because you had Ben Platt, leading this, Zoe Deutsch in it. You're obviously bringing back Jessica Lange, Gwyneth Paltrow. People were excited for it. Dave, did The Politician meet your expectations?
It's funny because I don't know if I had expectations going in. I've seen some of his stuff. I think his best show was the first season of American Crime Story. Obviously, People vs. OJ. The Emmy certainly agreed. But I haven't been a fan of a lot of his work. But I wanted to check it out. The first Murphy Netflix show, as you said, there's a bit of a gravitas. Netflix certainly is promoting it. And I found it pretty entertaining the whole time. Only 8 episodes, and I ran through it pretty fast. But I think the more you examine it, the more you can poke holes in the show and find problems. But it's just kind of pulpy, soapy stuff that
Mm.
Ryan Murphy fans want. So I assume this is going to be very pleasing to all of his fans, but it's not Ryan Murphy doing anything new. And he certainly isn't doing anything risky like he did with Pose. So I guess it just depends what you're looking for. But I found it entertaining enough. Not in my top 10 or anything, but I liked enough of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of figure out what exactly they were going for this show, because it felt like almost an amalgamation of all of Ryan Murphy's previous works, maybe excluding the horror story stuff. Because I get a lot of a Glee feeling in ways, especially when it's very obvious they're just like, oh, we want Ben Platt to sing right here. Like
Yeah.
they're just kind of like putting him in a
Easily
bar.
Michelle this time.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't always make sense why he's singing, like just really random points. Um, and then you kind of have the feelings of I mean, I guess I haven't watched Pose, but just kind of like the stylization that Ryan Murphy is known for throughout,
Yeah.
really fancy clothes in this very
It looks really
upscale.
good.
It does look really good, and the coloring is eye catching. um and the dramatization of things, like when Bob Balaban finds out that Gwyneth Paltrow is having an affair and just runs and jumps out the window, and you're just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, so
Yeah.
ridiculous. But I think I found myself a lot of time just feeling like I don't really know how many of these characters I really like. Which for a show like Succession you can get away with, because there's just so much there that's
Right.
intriguing and fascinating. But the stakes in this just felt like, eh. And then you kind of bring in the mental health side of things throughout, and you're just kind of like, there's a lot to put together. I don't know if they
Right.
always did it succinctly.
Well, the thing about Succession too, Succession is incredibly well written.
Yeah.
This isn't, but The Politician has no subtlety at all.
No.
And even if the characters were more consistent with their decisions and their actions, and that made more sense, that was more congruent, it's just really on the nose from the get-go. Like Peyton, Ben Platt's character, is just a blatant ripoff of Tracy Flick from Election, Reese Witherspoon.
Yep.
And he's as we said, you see the shades of Lee Michelle from Glee. This is Murphy just kind of playing the hits to a certain extent, a lot of familiar material. And, he's cast people he's worked with before, like Jessica Lange, Dylan McDermott. And I think I remark right away is, like, is that high school? Like, is that a real high school? Like, I know this is supposed to be a affluent neighborhood. A lot of rich kids go to this school somewhere in California, but that did not look like a school at all to me. Certainly no structure to speak of. I mean, we're a little removed from high school, so what do I know? But that stood out to me. But hey, it was a really nice looking building, so I guess it was fun to shoot there.
but none of the places look like what they were supposed to be, at least to me, other than maybe like the mansions. But like when Peyton is in the hospital, that hospital room, I didn't even know what that was. It was like inside of someone's house. Like, it was very bizarre. Yeah, I don't know. And I think I felt like there's so much potential, and obviously Ben Platt is the person doing the most heavy lifting here. But like Gwyneth Paltrow, I felt like there was potential there to dig more into her and her sacrifice and the decisions she made with her life and her marriage. But they only go skin deep on it, and then you have someone like River, and who obviously had serious mental health issues and a lot going on for him. And after he dies, he pretty much just becomes Peyton's inner conscience, throughout the show.
Yeah,
Not
something
really
like that.
explored much further. Astrid, I thought there was some really interesting themes in terms of her and her relationship with her parents, and played by January Jones, and I didn't write the other guy's
McDermott.
name. Dylan McDermott, yes. So there was like so much there that they just never really got into, and maybe they will in future seasons. Maybe they're just kind of slow playing it. I am intrigued for the second season where they leave it off, but just didn't do a lot to have enough good faith for me where I'm like, I feel like they can land this and make it a really, really good show moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, none of the subplots really landed, felt consequential. I think everything with Infinity was just kind of like a black hole for the show. I just didn't want to be there. I didn't care about the boyfriend either. And Jessica Lange,
wasted.
Nana, she was so obvious. Again, no subtlety to speak of, that you assume we're going to see her be Patricia Arquette on Act like hours before it's officially confirmed to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was like, Infinity must be faking it like right away. And then by the end of the episode, the end of the pilot, you actually get that told to you. And it's like, oh, okay, so now what? Like, and also, I think a lot of these and actually with Infinity, it's kind of disappointing because I really like Zoe Deutsch. I thought she was incredibly winning and set it up. And I'm very looking forward to seeing her in general. But this just was kind of a weak role, I think, for her. Maybe in the future, in season 2, she gets to be more herself. We'll see. But the other characters, like Peyton's whole clique, his administration to be, as it were, they were all super archetypal, one note, not fleshed out at all. So I just didn't really care when they each got their little subplots later on, you know?
Yeah.
And like on one hand, like James is a trans character that's not addressed at all. Great thing to see, but there's also Murphy. He's made pose, so I guess it coming from him maybe doesn't mean as much, but that's nice to normalize that more. But I just didn't really think you gave enough to warrant so much diverting from this main plot line, which was Peyton. And you could have explored more about how Peyton was really, I don't know, a little out of his mind. And like, yes, he has a breakdown and he's in the hospital. And then by the very jarring final episode where it's almost like the beginning of a new season already,
right? Where
he has an alcohol problem now and just lost his purpose until the end. Like, I think it just tried to be like all things to all people and just kind of failed to be many things to anyone except Murphy heads.
Right.
But to your point about season 2, Judith Knight and Bette Midler show up.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm in.
Granted, Peyton can't actually run for state senate until he lives in the state for 5 years. We know he's from California, so that's not actually realistic, but who cares? But yeah, the lack of subtlety for things was pretty disappointing. Like, I think the best episode for me was that one, like, almost bottle episode where Astrid and Peyton are campaigning, and it focuses on the one
Elliot,
apathetic kid who likes to jerk off all the time. That was fantastic. That was really well done. Yeah. But in the middle of that, you have like talk about student IDs, which is just a blatant ripoff, like voter fraud and stuff. And there's no subtlety. There's no comment coming. So it just kind of feels amateur to me. But overall, that was the best episode, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I had that written down that what I liked most about that was how it really highlighted the absurdity of the race. Because I feel like for so much of the show, I was just like, where the hell would this actually be happening? Like, what in what school would it be this intense and this ridiculous? And like, obviously it's dramatized as a TV show, but it was so out there. I was like, how are other people not like, what is happening with this, high school presidential race? And they do comment on it sometimes, like they're doing the investigation. They say, hey, have you looked at Peyton? She was running against him. Like maybe he kidnapped her, and like, it's not a normal thing. Like they do comment on it at times, but I like seeing Elliot's perspective. So then I was like, okay, like the show maybe feels a tiny bit more grounded, or at least like, they realize how absurd it is. So I don't know. I'm definitely in for a second season though. I think just the concept is really awesome. Like, having a different race every single season. I guess they're supposed to do this for like 2 or 3 seasons, is a really great way to structure a show. I just hope that they can make the race and like that plot a little bit more intriguing and build it out more, and maybe pick and choose where they want to focus the commentary on. Yeah,
having like the new dirt on the new opponent being like a throuple, a threesome, like that's it. All right, fine, whatever.
Right.
Shout out the intro sequence, though. I thought that looked great. In the age of skip intro, most people don't appreciate that stuff anymore, but that looked really cool. Um, yeah, it's it's just okay.
Well, why don't we move from the politician to Joker?
He doesn't have
Uh,
any politics.
no politics with this guy. Um, so there's a lot to get into a Joker, and it's kind of hard to
Hmm.
pick the right place to start. We've been hyped for this movie for a while now, at least from the beginning of the year.
Yeah, ever since that first trailer.
Yeah, and you know, when it was announced Todd Phillips was doing this and that Phoenix was the choice. I mean, I think originally DiCaprio was theorized or rumored to be wanted for the role, and then ended up being Phoenix. I think we expected that this movie was going to be dark, and that this
Hmm.
was going to be a real look at um, a very messed up person, fictional person, obviously, but a messed up person. And I think they made the right choice, because if there's one place to start with a positive with this movie, and there's a lot to talk about. It's an amazing film, I think, and just looks great, gripping story. Phoenix's performance to me is the story, and there's obviously the political and social aspects that we'll get into. But I wanted to start. Do you feel like Phoenix in this role is the best performance of his career?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. It's a very showy performance from Joaquin, which you feel like is almost easy for him. An actor that can really
Mm-hmm.
communicate damn near anything, as we've seen in his career. And it was funny, as you're saying, Joaquin signing on for this role was kind of the early flag that this movie Joker is different than everything before. Because remember, Joaquin turned down Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
He was not interested in the studio system, the franchisation of things, which is probably why you can write off any kind of sequel. If there is any kind of sequel, Joaquin ain't coming.
Right.
But having and again, like the weird combo of him and Todd Phillips was always like, oh, Todd Phillips of all people got Joaquin to do something comic related.
Right.
Fascinating. And we'll get into
Mm-hmm.
Todd Phillips more. But yeah, I'm trying to think of my favorite roles just off the rip. I think The Master
Yeah.
is probably his best role. He's never won any of his
Mm-hmm.
any Oscars, right? He didn't win for Walk the Line. Um, he's been nominated a few times, didn't win for The
Mm-hmm.
Master. Um, I always really liked Commodus in Gladiator, supporting role.
Such a little
But
bitch.
yeah, for sure. Great thumbs down.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he has so much to do. He carries every scene, So
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like this, the gravity of performance carrying a movie, yeah, this might be it.
Yeah, it's probably between that and the Master for me. I also really liked his performance in Her, but it's such a subdued performance.
Right.
And in a sense, I feel like the Joker is kind of like, talking about Ryan Murphy mashing all of his shows together for The Politician. It's kind of like he took his character from You Were Never Really There, and then
Yeah.
Her, and also the Master, and just kind of like mashed them all together to make this sad, crazy, um, dangerous person. And it's interesting to think about the Joker in this way, because the last time we saw the Joker in a movie, it was Jared Leto,
Oh,
and
oh yeah.
very very famously that has been panned by a lot of people. Some people really liked the
Damaged.
role, right? But it was almost too in your face, and
Yeah.
especially after,
I liked some of his choices, but yeah.
well, and especially after Ledger, who
Right.
won the Academy Award for his performance, obviously posthumously, but it was such a subtle performance, and you knew very little about the Joker, and that's what made it so intriguing and that character so gripping. Is everything he did, you didn't know really what his motivations are. There really weren't any. He
Mhm.
laid that out there,
Agent of Chaos.
right? And he would tell these stories, and in those moments, it was like, where you don't know what is actually going on with this person. That's what makes them so terrifying. This is a look at the Joker where it pretty clearly explains how this villain came to be. And it's a very empathetic look at the character, which is
Mhm.
interesting
Which
because,
some people are not a fan of.
right, and that's I think where we can kind of get into the social commentary. But um I thought the movie as a whole is really, really good. It's probably in my top 10, maybe even top 5 for the year, because there were maybe one or two moments where I felt like it slowed a little bit, and I was like, where's this going to pick back up? But the first 30, 40 minutes I thought were absolutely awesome, and not even a comic book movie, just like a Taxi Driver-esque look at the 1980s and the
Yeah.
issues kind of going on in New York City, obviously portrayed in Gotham. And then the third act was just absolutely edge of my seat. Like, couldn't believe what I was watching. I thought it
Right.
was that good. How did you feel about the movie in general before we get into the bigger picture stuff?
Yeah. So I also really, really liked the movie. It's a fascinating movie to talk about for so many reasons, which I think really helps its case. But it's super compelling and it looks great. The performance is awesome. And I think what really stood out to me early on is, Todd Phillips, who we'll get to, coming from a comedy career, but I mean, Lawrence Shear's cinematography is just very reminiscent of what's influenced by this movie. Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, early Scorsese. And Max Friedberg's production design, who he worked on Beale Street, is superb. This just looks like late 70s New York City.
Yeah.
It looks incredible, And when we knew going in that this is going to be like a King of Comedy take, we've heard the director bullshit before. Winter Soldier is parallax view and all that bullshit that we hear about franchise movies. This is like really the first time where one of these IP driven movies is really actually inspired by Hall of Fame cinema of the past, to use a Scorsese term. And I think that just really, really stands out. It's really funny. One of those drone shots of the train, I'm like, oh, well, that's just the Bronx. That's cool.
Right.
It looks so much like New York. I know anyone who's been in New York City recognizes those kind of overhead, above ground subway platforms that some of the scenes are on. But every scene in a room is so immaculate. Like the clown locker room and Flex house, his mom's house, whatever. Everything is just so detailed, and you just don't kind of get that anything traditional. And I think the reason I like the movie so much is it could exist without any of the Batman universe trappings. This doesn't have to be a guy called Joker. Thomas Wayne could be someone else. Bruce Wayne didn't have to be in this. Obviously, the scene with the Waynes getting murdered, the classic crime alley scene, that didn't have to be in this movie at all. The movie completely still works. And that's fascinating to me. And maybe that's the future where directors see this is their way to actually make stuff at scale, is by dressing it up in clown paint or whatever it may be down the line. Now, what that means for movies, I don't think you should hold that against Joker. The movie itself, just on its own, is really strong and really compelling. And it's not the most comfortable watch, that's for sure.
No.
It's a pretty blatant look at a guy with some serious mental illness. It's a sick man, and eventually starts doing some very depraved shit. So it's not fun, but it's really great.
Yeah, and I think where Phoenix really shines in this is, I mean, obviously he carries each scene dialogue wise, but what he does with his physical presence on the screen is, I mean, just from the get-go, the first shot is him obviously very depressed and down and using his fingers to like rip his mouth into a smile, and and there's a tear coming down, and it's just like this whole, it really sets the tone for the movie right off the bat. And then you have a lot of shots where he's like shirtless and like either dancing or
lost
like
50 pounds.
Yeah, and looking like Christian Bale from the Machinist in this movie. And the way that Todd Phillips shoots him from like the top down on his back, and like the way his like muscles are like moving and like his rib cage sticks out, it's very creepy. And the way he dances, especially after that first killing scene, which I thought was one of the most interestingly shot and lighted scenes I can remember. Like the way it would go through the tunnels at certain points and the lights would flicker on and off, and then you'd see him like shoot. It was almost like watching like an old film, really. It was just fascinating. And that dancing scene in the stall or in the bathroom afterwards really, I think, highlights that character shift and does it so beautifully. And the way he just moves his body, it's like, ugh, like it's creepy, but at the same time, like mesmerizing. And
Right.
I think that portrays a lot of what Phoenix did with this character so well. What were some scenes or specific moments from the movie that really stood out to you?
Yeah, definitely the finance bros deaths on a
Yeah.
subway, as you just said. Um, Everything at Murray's show in Act 3, of
Hmm.
course. I mean, at that point, the tension is really high, but I think that looked good and that really worked well. And, there's not a whole lot of violence in the movie, but when you do get it, this rapid ultra violence, it's really striking. I mean, everything at the end, I think, once Flex kind of realizing what he's accomplished, you know,
Hmm.
I like the whole chase scene at the end with Bill Camp and Shea Wiggum, the detectives chasing him down
Yeah.
and then getting like stopped by the mob in the subway. Like, again, not a enjoyable thing to see, but still good. Let's see. I'm trying to think this because everything in the movie is very atmospheric and nothing really feels like it's like wasted scenes, wasted material. Everything's kind of serving the purpose. I think if you wanted to be more critical, maybe we could have gotten in the head of Fleck a little bit more.
That's
Fleck,
tough.
it is, but the thing is, like Fleck, as he says to Murray, he doesn't like have any like really views, or at least he doesn't think he does until he starts, ranting at the end. But we never really see him express any kind of anything really. He doesn't really make any observations about the world or his circumstance until we start seeing this kind of lash out. Um, but I mean, I like Brian Tyree Henry. He's so good that having him do something subtle at Arkham like that, awesome. Also the Thomas Wayne scene at the like the theater.
Hmm.
I thought they were kind of setting that up to be super obvious about him being the one who kills Batman's dad. Um,
Hmm.
like Jack Nicholson in Tim Burton's Batman, but they fake you out with that, just like they fake
Yeah.
you out with Fleck's mom not
Yeah.
actually having an affair with Thomas Wayne and actually being kind of the cause of all of Fleck's misfortune. I really like those fake outs. I thought they were pretty subtle and also good red herrings at the end. And like, again, we didn't need all this Batman stuff, but I think the way they weaved in the Waynes was pretty effective.
Yeah, talking about the storytelling, I think that's where Phillips, uh, who like I thought was masterful with this movie, really impressed me the most because in the first half of the movie, he builds up who you think this character is, and the second half is basically just tearing each pillar of this person's reality slowly. Taking away his medication and his mental health support, taking away his identity, his relationships with his family. The only stable things he felt like he had that he could really lean on and believe in are all a lie to him. And then it kind of culminates with the scene where he's in Zazie Beetz' apartment.
Yeah.
And you realize that she's like, you're in the wrong apartment, that they hadn't had this ongoing relationship he had fantasized about, which there were signs that probably wasn't real anyway, or it seemed odd that they would have this connection. But man, that whole turn, and then leading to him murdering obviously the guy who gave him the gun in the clown locker
Yep.
room, and
Glenn
that whole
Fleischer.
thing. Yeah, just and the supporting cast, just real quick, just the people you've mentioned: Glenn Fleischer, Zazie Beetz, Bill Camp, Shea Wiggum, Brian Tyree Henry. Just
Mark Maron.
yeah, could you have like a better? I mean, and fucking Robert De Niro. Like, what a goddamn supporting cast. Yeah, man. There's so much about this movie I thought was great. It's definitely one of the best of the year in my opinion. Interestingly, it has like a 70% Rotten Tomato score, 92% audience score. So a big difference between I think where critics are putting it and saying it's a. I think that a lot of where the negative criticism has come from is around the social
Right.
aspects of the movie. Did you have a security guard in your theater?
Nope. I went at 4:00 though on Thursday, the earliest showings they had. So maybe later, who knows?
I went Friday at 7, and there was a security guard patrolling my theater, which wasn't totally full, but it was off-putting. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of fear and hysteria around
Yeah, it's
what
a lot of
this movie
smoke.
could be doing. Well, what are your takes on that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the thing with the critical reception was coming out of Venice, 6 weeks ago, where this won the Golden Lion, the top prize at Venice. Critical reception was very, very positive. And then once it was shown again at TIFF at Toronto, that's where a lot of the negative takes started to come through. I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of fans, I don't know, were expressing thoughts that this movie just was in the pre-release cycle too long.
Mm.
And there's the reception, the backlash to the backlash. Phillips certainly lashed out himself. A lot of things being said. I mean, heck, people are running with Joaquin snapping at a guy behind the scenes as like him being a diva, and it's like, I think, what's our blog on that? Method acting is messy sometimes. Like end blog, like we're good, okay, relax. But yeah, we just talked about The Hunt like a month ago, the Universal movie that was completely shelved for political reasons, and Universal just kind of backing off.
Yeah.
Art, video games, movies, music, whatever it is, there's no tangible link to it directly causing violence, crime, or anything, right? So why are you treating Joker any differently? I just don't understand why people are taking it one way this time and not the other times. Now you understand why, of course, because Joker, Fleck in this movie, is a pretty obvious analog for the contemporary helpless white male rage that you see in incel communities, red pill communities, all
Right.
it's obvious, and I think a lot of people may be a little dissatisfied or off put by this movie and Phillips is because Joker at the end and this movie on its own doesn't really have a point of view. You have, I think all this really wraps up in Act 3. You have Joker on the couch talking to Murray, and the old woman next to him says like, "Oh, you can't say that," when he says a really off-color thing that he thought was funny. I believe it was about murdering the fibros, right?
No, it was the joke was knock knock, who's there? Like
Suicide?
no, it was a drunk driver. Like, your son died in a drunk driving accident last night or something like that.
Right. Yes. There you go. And all right, I was like, okay, that's a very obvious point at comedy and telling people what they can and can't say in the current climate. Okay, Phillips comes from a comedy background. I guess that was logical. Then right after that, you have the whole thing about people not knowing, I think it was from Murray, not knowing how to talk to each other anymore, and how most people aren't animals, and it's like, okay, there's the moderate point of view. Everyone, let's calm down. We can come together, bipartisan, right? Okay, another obvious thing. And then you have Joker, honestly, doing like some like hard left politics, right? About killing the rich and redistributing wealth and stuff, right? Obviously, it's very anarchistic at the end, but having a guy who represents the hard right people exposed to the hard left views, is there a point of view in there? I don't think there is, and it doesn't need to have one. But when it's so obviously analogous to a lot of contemporary controversial things that people don't like discussing, hot button issues, I understand people's reservations. But I think it's stupid to try and boil that down to blame the movie for perhaps inciting anything. Like, I know the FBI had some put out some precautionary materials out there, but they said the whole time there wasn't any real credible threats going on. And like, I saw the term like clown cell going around. Like, I don't, that's not real.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's similar to the conversation that comes up around any sort of mass shooting, in the idea that media or video games in some way influence what people decide to do. And maybe there have been certain instances where people have mentioned how these things contributed to a perspective. There have been school shootings where there have been pictures of the people beforehand with their guns and clown makeup, things like that. So there's an understandable concern, but does that actually mean that this is going to enhance the likelihood that someone will go out and do one of these atrocities? No, it doesn't. And I think you summarized it well in that final scene there, really exposing like the political ideology of this, and being that there's not one, but I think that everybody is so up in arms about everything all the time. It's like you really can't hear anything anyone's saying. Um, however, I think that um, I think that the point that's driven home most to me in this is the idea that uh, people don't want to see things that make them feel uncomfortable at times. And we've talked about how art in some ways can be uh, still artful and also offensive, or it can just be offensive and for shock value.
Right.
Thinking back to a lot of the comedy specials we talked about recently on this pod, like Bill Burr or Aziz Ansari, and how those things are handled. And I think Phillips actually handles this fairly well in this, like you said, because he doesn't seem to pick a side. He seems to incite a lot of different trouble in ideologies right now, and he does it in a really artful way that I think doesn't really leave you feeling like he's trying to go one way or the other, but just to make you think about it. And in the end, anarchy is what wins out, and that's what the Joker as a character has always been: is just doing shit to fuck with Batman, or to make other people feel uncomfortable, or to incite chaos. And that's who the character is. So if you came in here thinking the Joker's going to have any other standpoint, I think you were a little bit confused on what movie you were going into.
Right. And I think, suddenly now the Joker, because it's a little more analogous to the current climate, now the Joker is going to inspire people. Like, we can relax, I think.
Yeah. That final shot, by the way, of him like on top of the police car and all people around him was
with the grin, the blood grin.
That was some crazy like filmmaking right there. Amazing shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the right before that, the window shot. Very obvious homage to Heath when he's hanging out the cop car, and clicks back his hair in the wind. Awesome little callback there.
Yeah. And right before that, where he grabs the TV camera and is like talking right into it,
right?
Kind of like in the Dark Knight when he's doing the handheld thing. So,
right, of course,
I like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it begs the question now, like the future of this movie. We know we're recording this early in the weekend, so we don't have the official numbers yet, but it's expected to go anywhere from, I think, 80 to 95 million opening weekend, which, depending on where that lies, could be a record not only for September but also for October. Obviously, that's very successful, very, very impressive too for an R-rated movie, super violent. That's wild. And DC, Warner Brothers certainly needed that after they had a string of flops throughout the summer before it too. Now the Golden Lion prize at Venice, and Joaquin also won the Venice Acting Prize. Does that proceed us to take us to any Oscar glory? Obviously, the movie's very controversial. So is Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit won the TIFF Audience Prize, and Joker was right behind it. The Golden Lion, the past 2 years, actually went to Best Picture nominated movies.
Roma, Shape of Water.
Right. But before that, it hadn't been one since Brokeback Mountain back in 2005, speaking of Heath. So I don't know if we can really write that as any kind of bellwether at all, given the controversy. I think the best bet is, I think production design's very deserving. Again, that's only 5 nom categories, so who knows if it gets through, but that'd be awesome. But Joaquin is right there. Best actor, super, super deep with big names, tons of stars. So it's by no means a walk, but Joaquin also someone who has never won and is well liked by, I think, all kinds of communities. And I think that would be great to see. And it's funny, if he did win for Joker, Joker will go down alongside Vito Corleone as the only character to win twice by 2 different portrayals. Obviously, that was De Niro and Pacino. So who knows about that? I think it's way too early to tell. I'm curious to see what kind of cycle we have now with the movie out in the general public, and assumingly post no violence occurring due to the movie. Shocking. What happens next? I
agree. I think the interesting thing becomes the best actor race. I couldn't see this movie winning Best Picture. I think
I'm just talking about a Best Picture nom. If we didn't get that,
I could see it possibly getting a Best Picture nom. But Phoenix versus DiCaprio versus Driver for Marriage Story. Also crazy because Driver also has the Guantanamo Bay cover up film that
The Report.
the report that I feel like he could also get some buzz
Right.
for. But yeah, it feels like it's going to be probably a 2 or 3 horse race for that. Probably some other big names getting nominated. But DiCaprio and honestly everything with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the further we get away, I feel like just has a better and better shot of cleaning up at the Oscars for what it was and being a Hollywood film. It just feels like it's I don't know, destined.
Also, Todd Phillips
Yeah.
directly going after woke culture and the left. Not the best move to engender goodwill for your movie, even if you believe those things. And there's some, if you have some legitimate gripes about the pre-coverage of your movie,
he ain't running.
Not running, that's for sure.
It's too bad because I could see. I think he could be deserving of a nomination for Best Director, and to think that this was the guy that made Old School. I'm here for the gangbang, and then this is the same guy. Amazing story that he's come this far.
I mean, I just thought it was funny that it's like the reason I left comedy is because of the current climate and how you can tell jokes. It's like, no, bro, it's like you got to make a movie about the Joker, which was guaranteed money.
Yep.
That's why you did that. Also, no one saw War Dogs, and no one sees comedies in general. That's why you left. Anyone who watches movies knows the real reason. Like, relax.
Alan Sepinwall had a great tweet thread where he was making different points about, or satirical points about how comedy is bad, and then would post a gif of different comedies right now that are getting critical acclaim and are excellent. So
if Alan Sepinwall's dunking on you, he's a pretty calm guy. That's that says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, or not even the Joker. Joker. Drop just Joker. Any thoughts? Any last thoughts to wrap it up?
Like I said before, perhaps this movie is too indebted to Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. Its connections are very obvious. It is fascinating that we got something like this inside the loosely defined comic book standard, and I'd be curious to see if we can get anything. I mean, Logan and Deadpool paved the way in a certain extent to this point. Will we see this in the future? Because, Fox, they're not making it anymore. They made 2 of these. DC, I think, is our best bet to see more of this kind of stuff, because when the hell you expect Marvel to upset the MCU? I mean, let's see if Blade is rated R first,
Right.
It's probably going to be a while before we get anything like this. So I have reservations about saying this changes superhero movies forever. It's certainly perhaps the least superhero movie that's in the genre to this point. I think that's pretty clear, but I don't think it predicts the future until we see more evidence of everyone being more invested in these kind of alternative takes on things that are just really window dressing for other movies.
If this absolutely crushes at the box office, do you think there's an opportunity or a chance that we'll see a Joker 2 or something where it's maybe Batman? Because it seemed like they left a little bit of it open when you see the Waynes get murdered.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this movie could easily do Venom business, $800+ million. It's pretty. I think that's the kind of analog right now. Full release, rated R, all that. We're seeing the Batman with Matt Reeves, with Pattinson's portrayal of Batman, 2021, effectively next year. I don't know how you can, and Phillips for the whole time was the reason I made a superior movie, so it wasn't connected to anything. And when people teased the connection between Pattinson's Batman and this Joker movie, Phillips turned that down, rejected that idea. So if they were to make a connection following the money, I assume Phillips is not there. I assume Joaquin is not being the Joker. Perhaps the Joker is a sphere in the background. Maybe you see him shadowy in Arkham. I don't know. But I think it's really stupid to have 2 different Batmans that close together, because that would imply that you're getting rid of Pattinson already, which is kind of the whole opposite of the whole point. We're so excited about him because he's such a good actor. So maybe that's what's cool. This movie successfully does tease that, and did successfully, if unnecessarily, weave in a Batman origin, a familiar one, but it is there. maybe down the line, but I would say odds are no.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it, but man, if there was ever a chance to see Pattinson's Batman and Phoenix's Joker on the screen together, I mean, damn, that'd be some
Yeah.
crazy shit.
I mean, the other thing is you figured the Batman will be rated PG-13.
Right.
This was rated R, so a lot of hoops to jump through. Did you get the before your movie? Did you get the teaser to Christopher Nolan's Tenet
Yes.
with John David Washington?
I'm all in.
Yeah, I mean, we were all in ever since we knew Nolan was making a movie. We saw the cast. The trailer doesn't communicate anything. It's a short teaser. I believe they first started showing this back with Hobbs and Shaw, I think it was, or something else in August. So I hadn't seen it until now. But it's really funny. In my theater, there's a guy sitting in front of me, and right after the teaser ends, you know how for AMC theaters where we go, after the trailer ends, there's like a muted splash screen where it says the title again with the release date, and there's no noise. During that like 3 seconds, the guy down next stairs was like, "Oh, 70 millimeter. That's gonna be sick." And it was very audible, like normal volume. I died.
That's incredible.
He remarks to his friend, "It's like, we can't see that here, but that's awesome."
Those film fans, dog. I love it. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I'm all in on Tenet. Even the teaser, I was like, yes. And with the way it's shaped, where it's like the E is backwards, looks like it's going to be some either like time travel type stuff or something going back and forth. Give me all the Christopher Nolan.
Yes, sir.
We're going to wrap up there for this week. What do we got next week?
So next week, we'll talk about the Succession finale, full season 2 review, a little late on that, as well as the end of Righteous Gemstones, season 1, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, Gemini Man, an Ang Lee movie with Will Smith, and the first 2 episodes of Mr. Robot, the final season. So a lot of shit we really like all at the same time. So
going to be a packed pod. So hit that subscribe button. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find all the ways to catch the podcast. And also give our Nowstalgia Best of 2019 playlist on Spotify a follow. We'll see you next week.